Thank you, Mr. Clement. Good morning, brethren.
Good morning.
Brethren, we would be, by this time, the various slogans would be assailing our ears. Jesus is the reason for the season. And to put Christ back into Christmas. And many Christians justify observing Christmas by saying Christ was born. And they are celebrating that event, that he was born. Regardless of the fact that he was not born anywhere near December 25th. One leader of a church was bold enough to say that Christians have the freedom to Christianize or to transform any type of celebration and to use that to worship God. There's a problem with that, however, because in the case of Christmas, we are associating a lie with the Prince of Righteousness. We can safely say we know he wasn't born on December 25th, but if you know that isn't so, then why attempt to make it appear as if it were true? So we're associating the Prince of Righteousness with a falsehood. And lest we think that that is a light thing, it is not. Let us turn to Deuteronomy chapter 12. Deuteronomy chapter 12. And let's read verse 29. It says here, when the Lord your God shall cut off the nations from before you, where you go to possess them, and you succeed them and dwell in their land. Verse 30, take heed to yourself, that you do not be snared by following them. After that they be destroyed from before you, and that you inquire not after their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? Even so will I do likewise. And verse 31, he says, you shall not do so unto the Lord your God. For every abomination to the Lord which he hates have they done unto their gods. For even their sons and their daughters they have burnt in the fire to their gods. And verse 32 he says, whatsoever things I command you to observe, you shall not add thereto, nor diminish from it. Now, they may say, well, we're not observing any pagan thing. But the history, brethren, of Christmas is that it was rooted in paganism. Let me read to you an article here. That was written by former Prime Minister of Jamaica, Edward Seaga, who was himself a sociologist, and at the time he wrote this, he was a research fellow at the University of the West Indies. He says, early Christianity, in the first 3 centuries after the death of Christ, had no fixed date of the birth of Jesus. Most of the development of the early church was not in Israel, where attempts to teach the doctrines of Christ were bogged down with interpreting the movement of the sect as a sect of Judaism. And under a heading of converted pagans, he says, Christianity at that time did not exist as a single denomination in church. A large number of small congregations of converted pagans in the Mediterranean and North African countries held meetings in small groups in private homes. These worshippers were in touch mainly with other local congregations. They were held together by the teachings and writing of the apostles, especially Paul, who had been pursuing this mission for some time. The thing that he says here is that there were groups of pagans meaning they did not know the God of the Bible. And remember, at that time, the Roman Empire was ruling. And in the heading that he says there, the historic decision, Constantine the Great, who was the Roman emperor in the eastern leg of the Roman Empire, he says he was now seen as the emperor who defended Christianity, although he never formally became a Christian. I think he converted on his deathbed. He continued to participate in pagan ceremonies while cementing Christianity. His ability to straddle both religions served him well. And in AD 325, he made another historic decision. He summoned the great assembly of the Christian bishops together at Nicaea, now we know as the Council of Nicaea. At this first ecumenical council, many fundamentals of Christianity were settled. Which books should be included in the Bible, as most likely the Catholic Bible, so that there would be one standard doctrine of equal importance. The adoption of the Nicene Creed, I believe in God the Father Almighty, etc., creator of heaven and earth. It said, but there was one other major hurdle. A delicate modus operandi had to be worked out to continue to give respect and credibility to the powerful God of this unconquered sun, Apollo, as well as to Christian devotees. Sunday was the day of the unconquered sun, not the Sabbath for these so-called Christians. It was the day on which Christians celebrated the resurrection of Christ. Again, another falsehood. By an imperial edict, notice how it came about, by an imperial edict, he commanded that all soldiers should worship on Sundays, giving recognition to Christians and pagan observances. After this, it was only one further step to establishing the date of Christmas, which Christians celebrated as the birth of Christ. In the last week of December, the Feast of Apollo was held annually. This was the most important celebration of the Roman calendar. Christmas was positioned at December 25th, the day before the Feast of Apollo began. Christians and pagans could then happily have almost concurrent celebrations. So to facilitate the two elements in his empire, pagans and Christians, Constantine the Great decided to set December 25th as the date on which Christians would celebrate Christmas. Because the next day, what we call Boxing Day today, was the Feast of Apollo, the sun god. And that's how, quote unquote, Christianity developed this observance at Christmas. Let me look at the church's booklet. Holy days, holidays or holy days. On page 6, it says winter solstice celebrations. Both of these ancient holidays, and they're referring to a feast called the Bacchanalia, that was a Roman celebrated holiday, and the Saturnalia, in honor of Saturn, the god of time, which began in December, continued, etc. It says both of these ancient holidays were observed around the winter solstice, the day of the year with the shortest period of daylight. From the Romans also came another Christmas fundamental, the date December 25th, when the Julian calendar was proclaimed in 46 AD. It set into law a practice that was already common during the winter solstice as December 25th. Later reforms of the calendar would cause the astronomical solstice to migrate to December 31. But the older date's irresistible resonance would remain because it was linked with the sun god Apollo. And you may wonder why here in particular we see all of the festivity associated with Christmas, the drinking and the parties, etc. Here's what it says on page 7. The sun begins to return in triumph as you pass the winter solstice. The days lengthen, and though winter remains, spring is once again conceivable. For all people, it is a time of great festivity, which is why we see all the parties that you have around Christmas today. Nothing to do with Christ, brethren, because lots of these parties end up being drunken orgies lots of times. And Christ and God condemns drinking to excess and getting drunk. But this is a regular thing at Christmas time. We hear the pleas by the road safety people to drink and drive, or don't drink and drive, get a designated driver. So now how all of this, brethren, could be associated with Christ? And what about Santa Claus and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, both of whom are more popular than Christ at Christmas? How on earth could fictional beings, I mean, there's no reindeer who would fly in the first place, and that a reindeer could take a man around the world in less than 12 hours, I suppose, because he comes up just after the sunset. But by midnight, he is everywhere, knowing everybody who's naughty and nice and dropping gifts. Again, we see, how does that relate to the being who is the Prince of Righteousness? Let me quote something here for you, what Christ says. Let's go to the book of Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 42. And let's look at verse 8. It says, I am the Lord, that is my name, and my glory I will not give to another, neither my praise to graven images. And he repeats it again in chapter 48 and verse 11. For mine own sake, even for mine own sake, will I do it. For how should my name be polluted? And I will not give my glory unto another. So that when Santa Claus and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer become more popular than Christ at Christmas, we're giving his glory to others, fictional beings. So that this practice, brethren, to the extent that it influences us, we see the dark aspects of it. Not to be associated with Christ and God at all. And here's what Mr. Siaga noted at the end of his article. He says, as Christmas is celebrated throughout the Christian world, it is difficult to believe that this time of peace and fellowship had its origin in such a checkered history of war and intrigue. But it is not difficult to understand that the history of the world might have been very different if it was not for the vision of Constantine at the Milvian Bridge. Now again, the decision of Constantine. This was not God-oriented, nor God-ordained. Constantine made a decision to reconcile Christians and pagans in his empire, the Holy Roman Empire at that time. And he established December 25th. But we see the dark aspects of his brethren that Bible is saying, will not give my glory to another, which is what happens in Christmas. We give Santa Claus, we give Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the glory that should go to Christ, because we see more images of them and we hear more songs about them. And the one whose birthday supposedly is obscured. We seldom see anything about him except a distorted image of him as a baby. And he never moves from being a baby. Never. Although he grew up to be a man, he is never moved from being a baby. And the mother-child image that we see every year, again, has its roots in pagan celebration. So, brethren, let us be aware of some of these things this year, because as we work, as whatever we do, we could be influenced to some extent to participate in these things, and we may to one extent or not. But just that we should be aware, this is not of God, and these are some of the roots that it bears, and so we should abstain from it and keep ourselves.